Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. There's a teaching in the suttas called Dependent Origination, which is I think one of the more complex models of psychology that's ever been formulated. And it consists of 12 links, beginning with ignorance and ending in suffering. And it was the Buddha's model, or one of them, for how our stress and suffering come into being. There's one sutta where the chain gets expanded on. And instead of the cycle, which is usually outlined, where ignorance leads to sankhara formations, which leads to consciousness, name and form, the sense base is contact, craving, becoming, birth, death, suffering. And feeds back in on itself, where one becomes caught and flounders in that suffering and sinks deeper and deeper. The cycle compounding itself again and again. In this sutta, which is in Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha speaks about an alternate trajectory, where instead of suffering leading to more ignorance, suffering leads to faith. And faith leads to rapture. Rapture to pleasure. Pleasure to tranquility, to concentration, to knowledge and vision of the way things are, and so on, towards awakening. And this alternate model is called Transcendent Dependent Origination. And in the suttas, the Buddha says that there are two reactions to suffering, either bewilderment or search. And this pivot point, this mysterious moment when instead of our pain and imperfection and neuroses and patterns of suffering leading to more, where instead they lead to some intuition of something beyond, of a goal that is transcendent and worthy of our hearts in a way that nothing else has been thus far, is, I think, one of the more powerful moments in a life. Chogyam Trungpa, when speaking to an audience, once said, "If you haven't yet embarked on this path, go home now, because once you start, you don't get to stop." I think it was tongue-in-cheek. But there's a truth in that. Once you find something as powerful a vision as the Dhamma provides, in terms of a goal as perfect as complete awakening and purification of the heart, and the veil of our usual goals and surroundings begins to fall, and we realize that they are not worthy of investing our entire hearts in, it's difficult to turn away from that vision. Last Saturday, I talked briefly about the one instance I've heard of a stream enterer being reborn and what that would look like. And regardless of whether or not you believe in rebirth, it's a fascinating story in that Ajahn Nisabho spoke of, for the record, stream entry is the first stage of awakening. And Ajahn Nisabho told me about Meichi, a nun in Thailand, who'd formerly been the fashion advisor of the Queen of Thailand, and lived a good life, had a strong sense of morality, and enjoyed the good things. She went to Vienna often for the opera. And then one day she listened to a talk by a senior forest teacher, and after the talk had finished, she asked if she could go live in his monastery. And she gave everything up, traded in all of her outfits for a few sets of white robes, and lived in this tiny hut for, well, until the present day. She's still alive. And there's a great story of the Queen going and visiting her and being completely confused by what had happened, but in an inspired kind of way. And when you begin to encounter this level of sincerity in practitioners, it's shaking, it's moving. I remember as a layman being so hungry to meet someone who I knew had purified their heart to a different level, and someone who understood my inclination on this path at all. And, I'd come out of meditation and talk to my friends about, this thing I was doing, and they'd be like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And it was like, no, you don't understand. One moment stands out when I told someone I was going to ordain. They told me that they tried ecstasy once and they had seen enlightenment. So that was fun. But when I did become more acquainted with these circles of practitioners that surround the monasteries, not just the monastics, then you begin to encounter a level of sincerity and vision that is moving. For me, it happened, I'd taken a gap year and gone to Calcutta. And, when I was 15, I read Siddhartha, and that started me meditating. And then before college, I went to Calcutta, and I was aimed towards a life of social action at that point, and then met a doctor who was running a clinic there, doing kind of the epitome of what I had hoped. And she was emotionally exhausted, and I remember one night seeing her break down and just start screaming at the people that she was helping. And it really made it sink into me that there's got to be something else as well. There's got to be a sense of caring for the heart that accompanies all these external actions. And for me, I continued to meditate, my practice grew, but there was always a sense of not quite living a life worthy of my death, of doing something good, but always the compass needle was just a little bit off, always a slight sense of queasiness all through college, and a frantic scrambling to fill up that gap with everything and anything I could find, movies, relationships. And then after college, I was driving down the West Coast, and I just spent the last few days listening to Top 40 radio, Dan Savage, reading all 3 Hunger Games, or 2 of them, I think, stopping, just distracting myself in any way I could. And I decided to stop by a Abhayagiri monastery for a few minutes. And within 15 minutes of stepping into that space of quiet and silence, I realized I needed that help, that container to turn towards the suffering I was running so hard from. And after making that decision, everything fell into place. And that stream of Dhamma began to sweep me along as well. And that clear transition between suffering leading to more and suffering leading to a search and a way out, of samvega, disenchantment, of Plato's prisoner beginning to look towards something brighter. I mean, it happened when I first began to practice and began to intuit the power of these teachings, but it also happened that moment, stepping into the monastery and realizing that I needed to stop running. And then coming to Thailand and meeting teachers who are truly, I think, awakened, and I've never met anyone as selfless. Such encounters should shake one because it makes you realize what we're capable of. And if that's the case, then how can you justify living a life whose sole goals are a decent, comfortable, middle-class existence? And not that such an existence is incompatible with the path to awakening, but it's a means and it's not an ends. And I remember finally getting to the monastery, and all the love and the heart I'd tried to pour into this or that, into relationship, into everything that wasn't a big enough container, suddenly there was a riverbed deep enough to hold that current. Because there's a part of us which knows that it's meant for something much greater. And when it finally finds an object and a path, then it's found its correct orientation. And for the first several years of being in the monastery, even though I'd come out of so many days exhausted and tired, hungry, whatever, and I'd say, today I can skip evening chanting and meditation. I mean, it's just I've worked all day or something like that. I just couldn't bring myself to do it because there was part of me which had finally found what I was in love with, and the chance to go up and bow to an image which represented that, this golden Buddha of awakening, I just couldn't bring myself to not do it. So there's a real element of this path which is falling in love. And even if our samadhi's not coming together, if we're not attaining jhana, just this fact of purpose is enough to sustain a life. So that's my story. And I'd like to ask for others, for yours. So I think what we'll do is we'll all move aside, and then if people are willing to come up and just share how you got here, why you're here, and if there's an embarrassment or a shyness or a sense of being self-aggrandizing, then please remember that sharing that moment of transition, of awakening to something greater, or of what this path has meant to you is a real gift to the people around you. And it's worth a great deal. So if you can put aside that embarrassment for just 5 minutes, I think it could benefit a lot of people. And if people speak maybe longer than 5 minutes or so, then I might ring this bell quietly and you can sort of perhaps wrap things up. And Rahul, we can do the acknowledgement now. Sadhu, 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 anumodami. right, who's first?
I mean, I started on the path because I found a book by the Dalai Lama, and a lot of it started with reading. And I just knew I was Buddhist, but I didn't know how to actually meditate or practice. And so it's really been over the last couple of years that I've deepened my practice and done a lot of retreat. And I think, many people know, but I quit my job in October to go visit monasteries and go meditate in California. And I just got back from that a week ago. And so this is the most people that have been around in quite some time. Been in silence mostly. But I really have felt, especially I was at a Lokavihara for the last 7 weeks serving their winter retreat. And I really felt that it was the most important thing that I've done in my life. And there was something so beautiful and purifying about being in a place of silence and feeling so safe and being around other people who were so committed to their practice. And to also have the gift of being able to be of service. So I was, formally practicing meditation for hours a day, but I was also able to make food for the bhikkhunis and the other women who were practicing there, and also do some chores. And I just found that was a piece of my practice that had been missing, and it was really purifying and brightening for my heart. And I felt just such a sense of peace and of deep love that I had previously been really searching for outside of myself. So through romantic relationships or friends or family, just trying to get that love from them. But I found a lot of power in just peace and being able to feel that love within, coming from my own heart. And it was through practicing dana, generosity, that I was able to really conjure up of those feelings. So I am excited to try to figure out how can I bring this into my daily life as a lay person. And but I have noticed too that it starts to arise more spontaneously, that the heart is really wholesome, and the thoughts in my own mind were changing to become a lot more wholesome. And I just kept getting distracted in my meditations because I was thinking of all the kind things that I wanted to do for people, and just how much I wanted to love everyone. So it's been a really amazing journey, and it's incredible just to have this experience and be able to see what's really possible for humans and for the heart. So that's all I'll say.
Sadhus. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
Yeah, right. Thanks. Hi, folks. I just thought I'd share. Well, since I'm old, so I got this white hair, and it's so cool that there's so many young people here. So I thought maybe I could share something that would be inspiring. I sort of got started in the path like in junior high school because I became totally aware of death and just how incredibly fleeting this life was, and it just burned in my heart, and I was like, holy crap, it was just going to end, and what would be useful? I mean, just to going black at the end and not accomplishing anything was just unfathomable. And then secondly, when you sort of come of age, start to move into adulthood, and you start to cop to our own neuroses, I did, my own neuroses and all the tangledness of people around me, and it was just like a train wreck, it felt like. But it became clear that all those factors arose from some cause, and they weren't intrinsic to those people. There was nothing I could judge anyone for, because it was all because of stuff from something. And therefore, it was unwindable. It didn't have to be that way, and you could unwind it. And that's what sort of drove me into the path overall. And it's been a long journey, and I won't bore you with, I started meditating.
Just a little bit.
I'll bore you a little bit. I started meditating in 1968, so like right in the 60s. And back then, there were like almost zero Buddhist books. I mean, there was a little place called the Sphinx in Harvard Square that had esoteric books, but there was none of this stuff, pretty much. So it was hard, And I started off in Raja Yoga tradition with Yogananda and Muktananda, and spent some time in an ashram in India in the late 70s, lived in a spiritual commune for 6 years in Western Massachusetts, shifted to Buddha Dharma in the late 80s, about 87. I've been doing Buddha Dharma ever since, and a few decades in more like Vajrayana Tibetan practice, mixed with early Buddhism. I've always been kind of weird, so in the middle of that, I went to Thailand and had the great, great honor to meet Ajahn Chah and Buddhadasa when they were still alive. So that was amazing. And I think part of what I wanted to share was, part of the virtue of being old is that I've had a chance to contact extraordinary beings over the years, and kind of as this fine gentleman was suggesting, that helps us light our way forward to realize what we can be, because here in the middle of 2022, it's hard to see. It's hard to see what our unrecognized potential is. I hardly know where to start, but especially in Asia, Kirti Senchab Rinpoche comes to mind. He was a Tibetan Lama up in the cave for 20 years and practiced. Dalai Lama said he should come down and teach, and he was so frail, they were supporting him. I was in retreat, 3-month retreat at Tushita up above McLeod Ganj when he came, and I was in a hut. And anyway, I remember seeing me, he's like, oh my God, this guy's hardly alive. But when he hit the Dharma, when he started talking, he just lit up, and you could feel this waves of energy, and it stuck with me ever since, how much it's from the inside. Dalai Lama, I've been around him, he wouldn't know me from Adam, but at teachings and different things. And even in Muktananda, he was a great tradition in Raja Yoga, and I was eye to eye with him one time, and it was like there was nobody there. It just went fathomlessly back. So, and you gotta clock in your practice time. I feel weird saying this, but in the middle of a lay person, I've been very fortunate, but I've made it a complete priority for decades, pretty much, to do practice. To almost, my wife had to beat me over the head to make sure we go on vacations once in a while. But and I've had great support. And I was a journalist for 35 years and covered aerospace for 28, but because the people I worked for, even in the middle of the giant corporate structure, recognized my intent, they went out of their way to make it possible. So I got 3 leaves of absence to do retreat, and they let me put vacation time together to do long retreats. So I think if you clock it out, I spent more than a year in retreats of over a month. So I spent more than a year of long retreat and then all kinds of short stuff. And it continually refreshes. That's the amazing thing about the Dharma is, as we grow, we see that which was previously obscured. And that is simply astonishing. It doesn't wane, it grows. Our ability to see grows. What we encounter from the suttas grows. And I'm just finished the Samyutta Nikaya for the second time, and it was like night and day from the first. That's a connected discourse. It was the first time I read it, and so there's this amazing resource out there. And then to be around persons like this fine gentleman is also amazing. And even around here, you know, there's, how am I doing? Almost done? I've been talking.
About, but
Okay.
sorry.
I just finished I just want to share some stuff to inspire you. That's sort of my intention. I mean, I sort of was just, no, I'm not going to say anything. And I was, you know what, this might be helpful. So I just, if you set your intention, like set your intention and drop the distractions as much as you can, then the universe kind of aligns things. I had a great good fortune. I just finished a 2-week retreat at a Tama monastery, and I've known Ajahn Ritti for many, many years, so he lets me park my little kuti on wheels, otherwise known as a camper trailer, there. And so I did 2 weeks retreat there. It was like a thing with Lay Breezington on the jhana, so people all over the world online, and it was so fortunate to be there, you know, and it just felt so perfect. And you know, the funny thing about being old is, you know, maybe your memory fades, but when you're practicing the Dharma, it's like continually fresh, so it feels, how do I say, internally youthful, because it's fresh mind, and the conditions that have degenerated kind of don't matter. And the growth aspect does, you know, and so I just, for whatever that's worth, I offer that to you as, you know, that which might inspire you all to keep going. I'll finish by saying 2 things maybe. Chagatukul Rinpoche, he was a great Tibetan master I studied with a lot. And the one thing he always said was, don't give up. Don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. So don't, you know, because it's the very nature of the practice that we stumble into our stuff. And then we're tempted to sidestep, we're tempted to ignore, we're tempted to get stuck, and just don't. Don't. Keep going, because we get past our stuff, and then there's freedom. And also find ways to give. Tibetan Nuns Project is here in Seattle. We do a little volunteer thing every month or so. If everyone wants to grab me at the end, and I'll tell you about that. And thank you.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu.
Let's see. Something like that. Is this on? Hello? Okay. This is weird timing. I'm doing a speaker event tonight, so I was like, I should go up there and get a little warmed up real quick. And it's actually going to be about my story, so this is a good warm-up for me today. So I came to the Dharma path in a kind of interesting way. I came to the Dharma path in a rehab. I had been using hard drugs and had been homeless for a period of time. And it hadn't been the first time I was in rehab. So I was in there and I was lamenting to my counselor at the time that I was never going to get it because I didn't believe in God. And that's like kind of a big thing in the 12 steps, is you have to like turn your will and your life over to a God. And I was like, I'm never going to get it because I don't have that. And she handed me this book called Dharma Punks. And it was the first time that I kind of saw somebody like me that could live happily. And that was kind of the beginning phases. I didn't really get so horribly into Buddhism. Nobody I knew at the time was really into it, but I would read some Buddhist literature here and there. I would try to meditate here and there, but it would often be just kind of like whatever I made up at the time. And so I had remained sober for several years, and kind of chased the worldly joys of like, I got the car, I got the house, apartment. I got the kid, I got the partner, I got all the things that were supposed to make me happy, and I was more miserable than ever. And I was just like so confused, right? I was like, well, I'm clean, I'm sober, like I did all the things. Like, look at this checklist that I've accomplished. And I just deepened my Buddhist practice at that time. Really, at first, the meditations just offered me like it felt good, in the beginning. And that is kind of what hooked me in was, the meditations just were kind of a relief of stress. And then eventually the veil lifted in my meditation practice. And I was able to begin to see all of the ways that so much of my own suffering was why the world around me felt like it was crumbling. It wasn't, the fault of the world necessarily. And so I've been, kind of rigorously on the Dharma path for maybe about the past 7 years. And, it hasn't necessarily been the easier, softer way for me. It's been, I kind of thought that my meditation practice would just be like, I will meditate and I'll just feel happier and happier and happier. And that hasn't necessarily been the case. It's been kind of like, the rug ripped out underneath me and, lots of tears and reinventing myself and, just slowly excavating the heart that was underneath all of the solidification that I'd built around it. And it's, but it's worked. Like I said, even though it hasn't necessarily been the easier, softer way for me, I suffer significantly less than I ever used to. And, I feel the abiding love and joy that doesn't need to come from anything necessarily outside of me anymore, that I've been able to kind of find that within myself and dwell there. And I don't know, I definitely was not expecting that to be the result of the Buddhist practice. I didn't really, I guess, like I said, I just expected a stress relief from a hard day's work and not necessarily all that came with it.
Sadhu, 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 sadhu bodham.
Hi, everyone. It's weird being in front and facing everyone here. My name is Jenny, and I believe that my Dharma path, I think that I was more born into it and inherited Buddhism. My family is from Cambodia, and ever since I was a little girl, like my earliest memories was doing a ceremony for my grandfather when he was very elderly and close to passing away. And I remember all of the neighbors and the Cambodian community surrounding him and, doing our prayers. And my family went through the genocide, the Khmer Rouge, and I didn't. I was born here in America, and we relocated to Bowling Green, Kentucky, then spent some time in California, then up here in Seattle, Washington. So as you can imagine, I think that I dealt with a lot of identity issues. Growing up, my parents, looking back now, thankfully, they remained very close to their culture. And so I lived a very Cambodian life at home, and yet when I stepped out of my home, it was very westernized, it was very American. And looking back on it now is very conflicting. And I think that I rebelled a lot. I rebelled in many ways from the Cambodian aspect and from the American aspect, and I was always kind of looking for my own path. But that rebellion led to a lot of living a life of stress and making not so good choices. And I didn't know this. I think when you're born into Buddhism, it's kind of just like a part of life, and you don't realize that it was a practice in a sense. And I'm just realizing now that like all the hints of Buddha Dharma that my parents were just dropping on me, like don't get sucked into people's anger. And I'm like, Dad, you don't understand. You need to grow a backbone. and seeing my mother being so kind to everyone, including those people who had negative things to say about her, had negative things to say about our family. Just seeing her still giving and still going to the temple every week. I just, again, looking back, my American side is saying my mom is not a strong person for putting up with it. She's too passive, she's too this or that. And I looked down on it for a long time. And then my mom passed away. I was 21 at the time, and there was a lot of grief. There was a lot of, just as she was passing away, I finally realized how much I loved her and respected her for being who she was, including that kind person. But I never got to express that to her. And so the next year or two after her passing, I was even more reckless and more rebellious. Of course, grieving of that why I should have, I could have. And then I got pregnant with my son, who's sitting over there right now. He's 12 years old. And he was born. And for the first time in my life, I was actually able to kind of connect with my mother in a sense, because I was now a mom. And understanding all the things that she went through and still coming out to be the person that she was, I wanted to be just like that. I asked myself, here I am living such a stressful life and letting all these things get to me, and my mother, for some reason, she still held it together, and she went through it. Stories of like guns being held to her head, stories of just watching her children starve and being consumed by parasites and things like that. How did she get through it? And if she can do it, I can do it too. But what was the difference? Like, why was she able to do it? And this longing to want to connect with her, and not having her, but longing to connect with her, I finally just I was like, you know what? She went to the temple all the time. I'm just going to start going again. And I don't know what I'm doing. The Cambodian temples, everything is spoken in Cambodian, and my Khmer is not that great. So I was always a little shy about it, a lot intimidated by it. But I forced myself to go. I was just like, I need to go. I need to understand why. What is it about this that she always kept going to and dedicated so much of her time at? And at that time, I started getting books about Buddhism too. And when I was younger, there were a lot of books about Mahayana, like Dalai Lama Tibetan Buddhism, but not about Theravada Buddhism. And so I could never really fully connect with it, because I was just, in the back of my mind, I was like, these monks don't look like the monks I went to. So it just never connected. But finally, in my 20s, I found some books about Theravada Buddhism, and things started to connect. And so I started reading suttas. I started understanding what the vatanas were, like the things that we chanted at the temples were. And one day I just started chanting, and I chanted the Puttang Saranang Gacchami, going to the triple gem for refuge. And it finally hit me, and I finally realized my mom was taking refuge in the Dhamma that teaches about peace. And that's exactly what I was searching for, I realized, was that I was searching for peace. I was searching for this ability to be as kind and generous as my mother, despite everything that was going on around me. And so it was from that time that I realized that for me, that was the veil lifting. And I've just kind of been on the path ever since. And I go back and forth, I think. But my husband is really supportive, and I was doing a lot of spiritual seeking, and I told him I wanted to go to this 10-day meditation retreat. And being the rebel that I was like, people are charging like $2,000 for these retreats. Like, that doesn't make no sense to me. Why, something as beneficial to humans, why people would charge for that, right? Like, Buddhism almost has become, in the Western culture, almost capitalistic. People are making money off of parts of the teachings. And so it didn't make any sense to me. And I finally found a Cambodian temple that did, they called it a Vapassana meditation retreat, but I don't think it was. I think they focus more on Anapanasati instead. But anyway, so my husband, seeing the change and the shift in me, he encouraged me to go. He was just like, yeah, we'll go. Yeah, you can go. I mean, this is 10 days. I've got it, at that time, a 10-year-old. And he still let me go. And so I went, and I did it was like the first time where I learned, it was almost like going back into time, like going back into like the Buddhist time, or at least going back to like my ancestors' time, sitting there at a temple in Boston, that felt like Cambodia, little Cambodia. And I connected even more with the teachings and with my ancestors and with my mother. And I had realized I was also looking for, as a Cambodian, I wanted to find somebody that I could look up to. And in our community, we suffer a lot from the war. And so the people that I surrounded myself with, or not I surrounded, but I happened to be around, there was a lot of alcoholism, there was a lot of gambling, a lot of partying. That's how we kind of got through it. But I was like, we got to be more than this as Cambodian people. We got to be more. And so I finally found Mahagasananda, who was a monk from Cambodia, and he is considered the person who reestablished the Dharma in Cambodia again, because I think they said like 80 to 90% of Cambodian monks were wiped out during the Khmer Rouge time. So I read some things about him. I read his book, and again, that veil lifted. I poured myself into it a little bit more. I get to this temple in Leverett, Massachusetts, and it was a temple that was founded by Mahagasananda. And I even got the chance to visit his, I think the pagoda. I'm not sure if his ashes are there. But it was just absolutely amazing learning about him, being surrounded by his students, and almost seeing his energy poured into, and his teachings poured into his students. And I was like surrounded by that. And I remember the elder ladies. I mean, I was the only young person. I'm in my 30s at that time. And the elder ladies are just like, oh, Jenny, you're so lucky to be here. Who's taking care of your kids? I'm like, my husband? What do you mean? Cultural differences, right? And they're like, oh, he's taking care? He let you come here, even with your kids? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, thinking to myself, why is it such a big deal? And I realized the generational differences. And I heard their stories of like, oh, I couldn't go because I had to take care of my husband and my children. But times are changing for us women, and we're able to do these things. And I'm starting to now kind of sit with all the blessings that have occurred in this just past couple of years. And I dealt with a lot of mental health issues and had a lot of like suicidal ideologies, and just being so, what's the purpose of all this? And finally, the Buddha Dharma gave me that sense of purpose. I finally realized, oh, I was born into this. The identity, the issues that I was dealing with, oh, Cambodian people, this, that. I realized it was a blessing because I was born into the Dharma. From a very young age, I watched my mom and dad commit themselves to this. My dad meditated. I didn't know what he was doing. He was just, to me, talking to himself because he would chant. And I'm like, oh, he's going into a trance. I was like 6, 7 years old seeing all this stuff, So I didn't know what was going on. And there was a strong language barrier, I should say that too, between me and my parents. And that's why there was so much misunderstanding. But yeah, so being grateful to just being born into this, and also almost having that sense of purpose of sharing with my own community that there is life beyond the genocide, that we can grow and we can progress and we could almost, in a sense, Cambodians, we're so prideful and we love our culture. It's extremely beautiful. And I'm just starting to realize that the Buddha Dharma has been within our culture for hundreds of years. And that's probably the reason why it's such a beautiful culture. It's integrated in every aspect of our society. And it's just been lost for a little bit, but if we can recapture it, then we can show the world what it's like to go through something as terrible as a genocide that almost wiped out our whole existence. And we can share with the world that there could be more, that there's life after that. But there's that sense of a peace that's needed. But it starts with us. It starts with our own effort that we need to want to get to a place of changing our view and developing the right view. And so for me, attending these things is to not only develop my own practice, but it is, in a sense, contributing, doing something good for a community that has suffered so much.
Sadhu, sadhu.